Hello everyone, welcome back to another Realm of the Mad God video. My name is TS Page and today I'm going to be covering the Horticultural, or as I will be referring to it in this video, the Hollyhock Huntress set guide. Right now I'm showcasing the shots of the bow and the lotus without the set, and then equip the set to show you what it looks like with them all on. The reason I find this set to be by far one of my favorites is quite simply because of how enjoyable it is to play and how well all of the pieces of the set fit together. But before discussing why they fit together so well, let's take a look at the items themselves. First off, we've got the Britannian bow. The Britannian bow does a base 160 to 195 damage shooting in one shot. This is pretty in line with the void bow or any other one-shot bow, but unlike the void bow or the deathless crossbow, these shots do not pierce through enemies, but they do pierce through the defense of the target. The bow has a range of 8, giving it significantly more safety and giving you a lot more range to play with a slightly hindered rate of fire at only 90%. If we take a look at the Britannian bow at the lower defenses, it is quite outclassed by Void and Deathless. But with that being said, once you get up to those higher defenses, it becomes much more comparable, and you also have more range to hit those shots with more safety. Next up, we have the Life-Bringing Lotus. This is actually by far one of my favorite traps in the game, and is by far, as you'll see later in the video, one of the most fun and interesting items to use in general. What it does is you throw the trap as you would throw a normal trap, but instead of doing damage to other enemies, you throw it onto yourself, or the group, and it'll inflict healing and berserk upon players for 4 seconds. The trap has some really interesting quirks, one of them being that rather than it being a trap that sets into the ground and an enemy or a player has to run over to activate it, it rather just activates like a poison, and as soon as it hits the ground, it'll activate. But I will show you later that despite only having 3 tile radius, it is still very easy to land and get that buff. Something else to note, it also gives a nice bonus at the end with a plus 40 MP boost, as well as plus 5 dexterity, really helping out the spammability of the trap, as well as your overall DPS with 5 dex. The next thing to look at is the Hollyhock hide. While it is not the highest DPS armor in the game, it is right now my favorite. This is because on top of that plus 8 dexterity that it gives you, which makes it the second best for DPS, it also gives plus 10 defense, plus 5 vitality, and plus 3 speed, which are all very nice, but also has one extremely fun and very underrated passive ability. The passive ability of this armor is a 10% chance to receive plus 10 dexterity for 5 seconds upon taking damage with no cooldown. This is extremely cool in low damaging enemies, or in the Godlands where you're going to be taking shots here and there anyways. Another thing to really think about is, I'll show this later as well, is if you slap on a T-shot and you've already got the Berserk from the Lotus, you are literally a machine gun. Last but not least, well, actually last but least, we have the Chrysanthemum Corsage. This ring is almost really great, but instead it's just pretty decent. We have the plus 70 MP, plus 5 speed, and plus 7 dexterity that make this ring a pretty solid ST ring overall, but not, as I said, great like any of the other great rings out there. The thing about it though, if it was a plus 70 HP ring, it could actually be in contention for being a really solid high tier ring, but that's just speculation and that's not actually what we have to look at, so instead we're stuck with a pretty average tier ring. When looking at the set bonuses given by the set, we kind of see what the build is going towards. It really is marketing itself as a high-speed, high-dexterity class, and once you get your hands on it and play with it for a little while, it definitely does feel like a very solid, high-speed, high-dexterity class. When looking at 2 pieces, you see that we get plus 20 MP as well as plus 3 speed and dex. This just goes right in theme. 3 pieces, we get plus 30 HP, plus 40 MP, 5 speed, 5 dex, and for the full set, which I think is the most vital, is the plus 70 HP, plus 3 defense, plus 5 speed, and 5 dex. This segues me beautifully into my next topic. That is the base stat totals. And as you can see, attack is completely unchanged as well as whiz, as those are not focal points of the set. Vit is slightly increased, but once again, with pets, it's pretty much a non-factor. The interesting things come in whenever you look at def, which is only plus 13, which is pretty comparable to a golem garments or a spectral cloth armor, but when you look at speed, you have a base 71 speed on a Huntress, which is extremely high for Huntress, as well as a base 83 dexterity. Pairing that with the Berserk that you get from the Life-Bringing Lotus, makes it a extremely good combo and makes you shoot hella fast. Now that I've gone over all the items within the set, I would like to go over some of the gameplay mechanics of this good old set, because it is quite interesting and is very unique in how it is used. As you can see in the tutorial right now, I am trying to take shots to activate the 1 in 10 chance of proccing my Hollyhock hide. Whenever this does happen, as you just saw on screen, you'll see the plus dex show up above your head, indicating that you have plus 10 dexterity, boosted by the armor itself. Throughout the tutorial, you've kind of seen me throwing around the life-bringing lotus without really explaining it. As you can see right now, I throw it out, run into the splash radius of it, and then it'll give me a healing and a dexterity buff, or a berserking buff. And the cool thing about this is, I will show this to you in a second, you can actually run at full sprint in any direction and actually be perfectly within the radius to get buffed, so you don't even have to slow down if you're running in a straight line. As always, the Godlands is a pretty good place to showcase the set, and surprisingly this bow really does shred through gods quite well. It doesn't pierce through the enemies, which is kind of unfortunate, but it does pretty well at what it does. And every time I take a shot from a djinn, or basically every time I take a plethora of shots from a djinn, the armor will proc and you'll get that awesome dexterity bonus. Now, when running around, you can also see the purple shots above the enemy's head, meaning it is completely ignoring defense. This is extremely good for bosses that go through armored phases or just have super high defense in general. Here I decide to go run into a snake pit, and this is where I actually used my T-shot as a swap out for the set. While the T-shot is a significantly worse bow than the Britannian bow, it is actually quite a bit more fun, I would say, than the Britannian bow itself. And this is simply because whenever you get to use the T-shot, you can pierce through enemies, and the 200% rate of fire is absolutely ridiculous with everything procced. I showcased it a little bit earlier during the actual tutorial? I guess it was a tutorial and a tutorial for... you get it. It's a tutorial for the guide, and it was a tutorial. It made sense in my head. Anyways, the life-bringing lotus paired with the good old T-shot is extremely good for clearing through hordes of super low health and low defense enemies, and so that T-shot pairing with the life-bringing lotus, it's just so fun. I just zoom around in circles and can just absolutely spray, and it's so fun. Anyways though, for the boss itself though, I do switch back to the Britannian bow because it is just simply higher in DPS. If you have to shoot through a lot of things like orcs enemies, or there's a bunch of enemies in the way of the boss, then using a swap out bow like the Doom bow or the T-shot is not a bad idea. But if you're just clearing solo enemies, or you're just clearing a boss in its entirety, then the Britannian bow and the full set bonus will help you a lot more than using a swap out bow. On the topic of swap outs, as far as the armor goes, unless you are doing something extremely tedious or rushing based, then you should have no reason to swap out the armor basically ever, because the set bonus does provide you defense and HP. Now, once you are doing something other than that, there are good swap outs. For example, you could switch to Sea Trap to Paralyze, or switch to Giant Catcher to Slow. There are a lot of good swap outs that can go in pairing with the full set. But as a whole, the full set is completely viable on its own, and you really do not need anything to pair with the set for it to be an extremely viable set. In the Mad Lab, I switched through basically all settings of bows and swap outs that I have, just for the sake of, well, I can. And this set is by far one of my favorites just because of how fun it is to play. High dexterity means you're shooting faster, and shooting faster means it's just more fun in my opinion. And as well as the high dex, you got high speed. And I love fast characters, as is why I play Warrior, Trickster, and a lot of other classes like that a lot. And it's just cool. Like, look at the sprite. As I zoom around, my wings are flapping, I'm running around, I just feel like a little fairy just zooming everywhere. And it's just such a fun set. It's just such a fun set. I highly recommend trying to get your hands on it. It's not the most common thing. If you can get the bow though, it is pretty farmable. All of the items are obtained in the Woodland Labyrinth, except for the life-bringing lotus, which is found in the Magic Woods. The last super awesome thing about this set is that it essentially replaces the need for a warrior in a big group, or a small group for that matter. If you don't have a warrior, or no one has a very good warrior to bring in a small group setting, just bring this class instead, and you can get your berserking buff from this class instead of a warrior. And to finish the video, I have a good old 1v1 between me and Dr. Terrible going with the full set. While I only showcase lower tier dungeons, the set is completely viable at all tiers of dungeons, low and high. With that said, I think that about concludes this guide. I really do appreciate anyone who made it this far, and I really hope you enjoy the video. I tried to put a little bit more effort into editing the beginning and really tried to make it worth your time. Now, with that said, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and if you have any ideas for sets that I should review in the future, or just video ideas, please leave those in the comments below, as I'm always trying to make new and innovative content. So, with that said, thank you all so much. I will see you again later. Have a great one. Peace.